35 years ago, the Chinese Communist Party killed thousands of unarmed students with tanks and machine guns while the whole world watched.
The worst part of it, they did this without any consequence. It wants to be the master of the earth, the engineers of human souls.
The United States has embraced China, and that decision is having big impacts here in America.
The influence of communism, unfortunately, looks a lot like the same kind of intolerance of viewpoints and differing opinions and freedom and liberty.
Hear from Zhou Fengsuo, a former student leader in China's 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, and Tom Oliverson, a state representative in Texas, as they work to counter communism and its influence in the United States. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A virus spread worldwide, killing millions, enabled by the lies of the Chinese Communist Party. Millions of American jobs lost because of the Chinese regime's technology theft. As Chinese companies buy up land near U.S. military bases and Chinese hackers target U.S. water and power systems, threatening American safety and our way of life. All this leads to a question. What is the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party? Chinese people first discovered it 35 years ago when Chinese students protested in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, calling for freedom. And the People's Liberation Army unleashed weapons of war on unarmed people. 35 years later, have Americans learned the truth about the CCP? To find out, we welcomed two guests, a former student leader in China during the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre who fought for freedom in China, and a member of Texas House of Representatives who's working on constructing a monument in Texas to honor victims of communism around the world. First, we turn to Zhou Fengsuo. In China, it's called the People's Liberation Army, right? It sounds like it's for the people, but during Tiananmen, the tanks were turned against the students who were trying to stand up for democracy, and you were there. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was a moment the so-called PLA revealed its true color. It serves only the families, the ruling families of CCP regime. Deng Xiaoping. It doesn't follow people's will. It was used against people's will. Millions of people demonstrated for a free and democratic China. And the troops, with tanks and machine guns, were deployed to kill people. And they did kill thousands of people while the world was watching. And the worst part of it, they did this without any consequence. And the United States choose to embrace such a regime, allowing it to thrive today. That's why it's becoming such an existential threat to the United States and the democratic countries now.
On that note, what is the fundamental goal of the Chinese regime? Because it seems in the U.S. there's kind of this misunderstanding maybe. It's like we do all these different word games. We're like, oh, we don't want to decouple, we want to de-risk, we want to trade. You're seeing that. But what is the fundamental nature of the Chinese Communist Party?
Chinese Communist Party never had its global ambition. It wants to be the master of the earth, the engineers of human souls. That's what they have been doing in Beijing, in Tibet, in Xinjiang, and now in Hong Kong. We should know that. And if we are not acting fast enough, it will happen to Taiwan. And next, it will be here. China without democracy can only be a threat to the world. The worst part is that for now, United States even depends on CCP China from everything, basically, even military supplies. I think, United States has been blind to the fact that, China without democratization cannot be a partner. Without democratization, we are only dealing with the ruling party, right? The will of Chinese people, for example, on Tiananmen Square, were calling for freedom and democracy, and it was repressed with brutal force. People want to access new information, and we have to find ways to enable Chinese people to express their will, and that's where I think United States has done nothing to really help in a material way. We should definitely change that.
And it sounds like, in a way, a lot of people in China, even under this regime, do want the free information. Maybe they do want democracy. They want something different. What would that benefit the world? Because it sounds like right now a lot of people look at China and they think of all the Chinese people as the same as the party. How would the Chinese people help the world?
No, looking back, I think 34 years ago on Tiananmen Square, that provided a glimpse of what a different China could be. Chinese people were hopeful in solidarity because they love freedom and democracy. That's why in the end there was a statue of democracy erected on Tiananmen Square before the massacre. And with that, the protesters were supported by people all over the world, Chinese people and the international community. So if China is democratized, it can definitely be a partner of United States and the democratic countries on the world stage. Otherwise, it's definitely a challenge, just like Nazi Germany. China took on a wrong path. Unfortunately, United States has embraced such a regime. It's the time to confront and challenge CCP. China's democratization is the only way to ensure that China can be a partner of peace and prosperity. And the United States must act decisively to help China's democratization. And at the same time, we must defend Taiwan's democracy.
Chinese democracy activist Zhou Fengsuo saw through the Chinese Communist Party's facade and that the regime wants to replace the U.S. as the ultimate global superpower. Over in America, more and more people are becoming aware of the communist influence sneaking into the land of the free. We spoke with Tom Oliverson, state representative of Texas, for more. He's supporting a project to counter communism in his state, a monument honoring victims of communism outside of the Texas Capitol grounds. Congressman Tom Oliverson, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, June 4th is coming up. This will be the 35th anniversary since the massacre in Tiananmen Square in China. Now, you actually co-authored HCR 26. This is a bill that Texas Governor Greg Abbott has signed. It would construct a monument honoring victims of communism outside of the Texas Capitol grounds. Tell us about that, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
Yeah, so the Goddess of Democracy, as you alluded to, was first erected in Tiananmen Square in 1989 in response to the death of a reform leader. And although the original goddess was destroyed, there is an exact replica in Washington, D.C. of the Goddess of Democracy, and that is the National Victims of Communism Memorial. And so I got the idea for having a state monument in Texas because, unfortunately, occasionally we have marches and demonstrations from pro-communist people, believe it or not, in Austin, Texas, who like to march through the streets of Austin with effigies of Stalin and Mao. And so my thought was, we need a goddess of democracy in our capital so that we can also remember the lives that have been lost through the horrors of communism worldwide.
I want to expand on that last part. So why is it significant to have this in Texas? Is it as a reminder, or what is the goal here?
Yeah, the goal here is education, and just to remind people, you know, Texas is a very diverse state. We have a lot of people from different parts of the world who may have experienced communism firsthand or have relatives who suffered under communist regimes. And so I think it's a very poignant issue for a lot of people in Texas. And so to be able to point to something on the Capitol grounds next to the various memorials that we have for fallen police officers and firefighters and the war memorials that we have to say, let's not forget all the innocent lives that were killed by communism worldwide, so that future generations of Texas will never forget the true legacy of communism. We felt like that was a very worthwhile undertaking. We would be the only state in the Union, or will be the only state in America, that actually has a state monument on the Capitol grounds to the victims of communism.
And given that, what is the progress of this project so far? What are the next steps here?
So we've secured permission from the government to build the monument. We have set up a foundation. Right now, you can actually find out more about it at the website is txvocmonument.org. And what we're doing right now is we're in the process of raising money. We have gotten permission and agreement from the sculptor of the original monument in DC that they would be very willing to sculpt us an exact replica. So we're in a fundraising mode right now where we're looking for people to support the monument. We're also looking for people who would like to join us in this project and maybe come alongside and volunteer and help us bring this to life so that we have this on our Capitol grounds.
And Congressman, you mentioned earlier how many people in Texas actually escaped communism or survived under it. What does communism or the influence of it look like in the U.S.?
I mean, I think that the influence of communism, unfortunately, looks a lot like the same kind of intolerance of viewpoints and differing opinions and freedom and liberty that you currently see in places like the People's Republic of China, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, but historically have seen, throughout the world where people who practice faith or who have a religious background are persecuted and incarcerated and sometimes even executed. Obviously, we don't see that quite at this level in Texas, but we certainly see people being persecuted for their faith and for their beliefs, and a desire on the part of those who would espouse a communist ideology to essentially break down democracy and reestablish a strong central government that essentially controls everything, where government essentially is your lord and master. We see that taking root in our colleges and universities. We see that taking root in a lot of our big cities. And people just don't remember the legacy. We're not talking about something in a hypothetical. We're talking about a style of government and a way of living that leads to brutality and has led to brutality the world over. And people, unfortunately, are not being taught those lessons. And so we aim to make sure that that doesn't continue to be the case.
Expanding on that last part, what can Texas and the U.S. do? I've seen in Florida with Governor Ron DeSantis talking about teaching the horrors of communism in the classroom. That's been making headlines. But what can the U.S. do to counter this communist influence?
I mean, I think that is a big piece of it, is that we need to start educating the next generation of Americans to what communism actually looks like in reality. Because what I think they hear most of the time is sort of this idealistic Marxian utopia that, it's all everybody shares and it all works out great. And unfortunately, they leave out all the parts about oppression, greed, genocide, and the things that we see literally everywhere communism is tried. So the education piece is important. I think remembering the past, remembering the lives that we've already lost to communism is an important piece of that. And I think that there are steps that we can take. Texas took a bold step last session by prohibiting insurance companies from covering and paying for organ transplant surgery performed in China because of the ongoing human rights abuses that are occurring with the illegal organ harvesting trade in the People's Republic of China. And so these are all things that we can be doing and should be doing, not just in Texas, but nationwide as well.
State Representative Oliverson is also an anesthesiologist. We discussed forced organ harvesting in China and its impact on Americans. Tom Oliverson, a doctor and a state representative for Texas, says the problem of systematic forced organ harvesting under the Chinese Communist Party expands beyond China's borders and concerns Americans too. Here's what he said at a press conference last year. Watch.
It is clear to me through several sessions of work on this issue that the Chinese Communist government sees its people as a commodity, not as individual human beings with guaranteed rights and liberties. And they continue to imprison their people and offer them up willingly as non-voluntary donors of organs. I have seen firsthand hospital websites in English and Mandarin in China advertising hearts available, donors standing by. And members, friends, you know that nobody can survive a transplant like that. These people are being sacrificed for financial gain by a government that doesn't believe that they are actually human beings. And we aim to put a stop to that once and for all.
I want to zoom in on the combating the forced organ harvesting in China. How and when did you learn about that was happening in China?
So that came to my attention in 2019 when members of the Southern USA Falun Dafa Association approached me and shared with me eyewitness testimony. They showed me websites at Chinese hospitals where in Mandarin and English was being advertised, get your heart transplant here, donor standing by, which horrified me as a physician because I know very well that you can't donate your heart unless you're willing to give up your life. So to be standing by to give up your heart means that you're an involuntary donor. It's not your choice. And so this is deeply troubling to me. And so at that point, I started investigating it more, and we began working legislatively to turn the tide and really open people's eyes in Texas as to what was going on over there with organ harvesting.
I want to zoom in on that. So that means that these people are basically being killed. Is that right?
They're being executed. And we heard not just from Falun Gong practitioners, but also from Christians as well as the Uyghur community, the Muslim community in China, that they would be sent to these detention camps. They would get this complete medical examination, but not for their benefit, and all this blood typing and testing, and then people would be collected in the middle of the night sometimes and never come back. And there were stories circulating of people being harvested for their organs. And as I said, they are advertising, and the World Health Organization even investigated this and found credible proof that in fact this was an ongoing human rights tragedy in China.
On that note, Congressman, what was the goal of the bill that was related to forced organ harvesting last year? What has it achieved since then?
So what it does is it essentially prevents a person who is covered under a Texas-based insurance product from being able to get any payment or reimbursement or coverage for either the transplant or the aftercare associated with the transplant if they receive that transplant in China, where we can't be certain that it wasn't a harvested, stolen organ. And so it creates an incredible financial deterrent because it turns out that solid organ transplantation is the most expensive medical procedure, from the procedure and the aftercare, that insurance would cover or pay for. And most people, unless you're just incredibly wealthy, could never afford to obtain and pay for an organ transplant on their own. So it essentially shuts the market down in Texas. And we're hopeful that the federal government and that other states will follow suit. And we're aware that at this point, there's at least 4 other states that are working on or have passed similar legislation. So the movement is growing, thank goodness.
There was a recent one in Utah, to your point, but when it comes to the forced organ harvesting happening inside China, how does that impact Americans and the U.S.?
I think it primarily would impact, anyone that would go over there and benefit from it. But again, I think also it impacts Americans because in my conversations on this issue, I learned that there are a lot of American citizens and lawful permanent residents who have family members or friends who are still incarcerated in one of these camps, or they haven't heard from them in a while. And so I think it's not just that we need to prevent Americans from benefiting from this, but also I think we have a lot of Americans, a lot of citizens that have family members who unfortunately are victims in this. And so those are some things where it would be, directly impacting Americans.
And Congressman, with all the different areas covered today, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, we sure appreciate you giving us the opportunity to get the word out about the Texas Victims of Communism Memorial. We look forward to seeing that erected, and we look forward to partnering with any of your viewers that might be interested in this. Again, the website is txvocmonument.org.
Congressman Tom Oliverson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time as well.
That was Tom Oliverson, a member of the Texas House of Representatives, and Zhou Fengsuo, a former student leader during China's 1989 student protests, both of them working to counter communist influence in the United States. Thank you for joining us for this special report, and please join us for China in Focus right here on NTD News. See you soon.